Hey y'all, we're gonna start the stream, but we're gonna give it 5 minutes buffer because people, roll in here. So we're starting the stream, but we're gonna give it 5 minute delay. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should just start. Oh, look, people are strolling in. Do you want to sing? Oh, okay. No. We don't want that. We don't want that. We'll just give it a couple minutes here. People streaming in. Yeah. I know. We have to be back here, right? Yeah, because if you come up here, it only gets your can't even see you. Yes, yeah, you have to be back here. So, all right. If you're back in a metal chair, please come into a white chair because we're all a family here, close together. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Just out of respect for everybody's time. Thank you all for joining us. Super excited. It's Friday, which is great. And we're super excited to have Laura with us today. She has traveled all the way from Wisconsin to be with us. So please welcome Laura here, if you would. Thank you. Yes. So again, just to give some general orientation to what we're doing, gave Laura and all of our candidates a general template here so that you'll see a lot of similarities in terms of the content. So she has added some pictures, which is fun for us. So we'll go through that. We'll have some opportunity for some questions. You can submit questions via text. I'll first ask some questions that have come up over the last couple of days for consistency purposes, and then people can submit questions via text. If you're on the stream, do we have it in the description again? The number. Okay, so if you're on the stream, you can look in the description of the event, and it should have the number 423-560-6099 that you can text questions to. And that way it'll come in. Again, if you're in the recording, seeing this recording after Friday, then you cannot do that. So just a reminder there. And we'll obviously take live questions as well. Again, after today, we'll be sending out surveys to get people's inputs on the candidates as well. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Laura. I'll turn on your mic. And you should be good to go.
Here we go.
All right. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here. As Ryan mentioned, I'm Laura Pagatti Williamson. I worked in the city of Beloit, Wisconsin, but I actually live in northern Illinois. So I was right at the border and traveling. So I'm very excited to be here today and having this opportunity to meet all of you. So with that, we're going to go get started. There's my agenda, similar to what I guess all the other candidates were doing as well. And I'm going to start off with my background. And my first job ever was when I was a teen, and I was working as a hostess and a busser for the Friday Night Fish Fry, which we happen to have. That's pretty prevalent in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, was our Friday Fish Fries. And I worked at the Knights of Columbus. So I worked every Friday. And so at first I would hostess, and then after everybody kind of cycled through, I would help the bussers with bussing all of the tables to provide customer service. My favorite job ever was when I worked for the Rockford Park District. There I was the Deputy Director of Capital Planning and Management. And what I loved about it is I got to use a lot of my experience and create fun. We built fun. And we got to tap into many of the resources of the community. Just to share a little bit, Rockford Park District was a very large organization. It was its own separate special service district. We had budget of over $35 million in the organization. And I got the opportunity to construct the 3 largest assets ever in the community's history for the Rockford Park District. So that was a very, very fun time where I was able to leave some legacy projects for future generations. My worst job ever was when I was in college and I took a summer position and I was working for the Rockford Spring Company. And I would have to do repetitive work every day, putting springs into this big disc that went around to check the compression. And I learned a lot of things then. I learned that, one, I had an appreciation for the people that are working in a factory. And I realized that was not going to be something that I could do. I needed to be out working with a lot of people, working out in the community. It was instilled with me pretty early on in my career. But it gave me a lot of knowledge and experience of the things I didn't want to do and what I did want to do. My top 3 accomplishments. One, it was the Nicholas Conservatory, and that's a very small picture, but that is along the river. Very similar. Rock River is not as big as the Tennessee River, but it's a regional legacy project. That was a conservatory. That was a $50 million project. I was very excited about that because the planning for that started when I was an elected official. And I was instrumental in saying to our executive director then, we need to start planning this project. It's going to take at least 5 years, and then we're going to have to construct it. And we were doing it for the 100-year anniversary of the Rockford Park District. So I worked 55 million, excuse me, worked very heavily in that project from the beginning to the end. And interestingly enough, I shared with Ryan, a little tidbit. As soon as we walked in this building, I saw the terrazzo tile floor, and I said, that's your river, isn't it? I did the same thing at the Nicholas Conservatory. And a little known fact is on the river, there is a place that identifies where Rockford is, which is my hometown, Rockford, Illinois, and it's my beads. It's actually a bracelet that I was allowed by the artist to place into that terrazzo tile floor. So that was really cool to be able to see something like that here. Another one was instituting a tax increment finance district within a major commercial corridor. And that was in a community called McChesney Park, Illinois. And we were going through revitalizing a major commercial corridor. We had a lot of blighted areas in that corridor. And so through planning, being innovative, the mayor was willing to work with me to try something new. That was when tax increment finance was first starting to be used. And he took a chance with doing that with me. And it resulted in a interchange being built on the tollway, as well as it was locating the National Guard Chemical Battalion facility. And I actually had an opportunity to go to Alabama to look at one in Birmingham. That was where their chemical headquarters was. So that was again another really neat project. And then thirdly, and I talked about it in my interview earlier, was community planning to repurpose a 3-part golf course to a year-round sport and family recreation facility. And everybody understood what organized sports was: football, soccer, baseball. But we had a large share of our community, youth particularly, that liked to do individualized sports. And so I had the opportunity to plan and to build a snow park. And for some of you who've never maybe even seen some snow, very much snow, it was actually a snow tubing and not snow skiing, but snowboarding, excuse me. And I was able to construct that. It was very interesting. And I worked actually with a key snowboard champion out of Utah who actually came and helped to design that. In addition to that, we were looking at a pump track and building recreational trails through that. So it was really a year-round facility. So what was very exciting for me about that is I actually held a meeting like today with community planning. It was the largest one the Park District ever had for attendance on a snowy February night. But what was more critical is that we had youth come out to that meeting and provide us with input. And it was really, really invigorating to see the engagement from our community to come out and plan that park. The one who had the biggest impact on me even today, and that's Webbs Norman. At the time, he was my executive director at the Rockford Park District. You keep hearing a lot about that. But it was an opportunity to really leave a legacy in the community for future generations, and that's really important to me. And Webbs also taught me, how can I help? He had his door open every day. Didn't matter what role you played with the Rockford Park District, anybody could walk through his door. He actually had a sign on his door that said open. And I've always learned from that. I've had that on my door in the past, is open. So any staff person knew I was accessible and that they could come and talk to me. And I think that's critical even today. And he also taught me the art of being humble, to be humble. And sometimes that's hard to do. And also to say, you know what, I don't know everything, but I can sure help you. How can I help you? Was the other thing. Even if we had to say no, was if I can't help you with that, let me try to find someone who can. Something my worst boss did that I learned from, and it wasn't not too long ago. I'm working in a hospital situation right now, and I'm newer to that facility. I'm newer to that setting with a hospital setting. And I was asking something very specific to hospitals when it comes to infection prevention, and I'm learning about that. And I was asking a question, and I know he was sharing his own frustrations with a process we had to do, and yelled at me. And I thought, wow, I'm just trying to ask a question. So again, reminded me about being humble and to have different perspective and to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes. So I always try to learn from those type of moments, including myself. And then something that my best boss did that I learned from, and it was my former city manager. I was newer in my role as a public works director, and my director of operations came to me and said, hey, Laura, we really want to try this new way to try to do solid waste pickup. And we were going to do it on 4th of July, but it happened to fall in the middle of the week. And she said, you know, for staff and just efficiencies, it makes more sense if we just pick it up. And we've done that on other holidays. I said, okay, great. We were trying to be efficient with our budget. I shared it with the city manager. She said, go for it. We did it. Unfortunately, some of our residents did not take kindly to that. We had some confusion, even though we had done some social media about it. There was some confusion. The council was receiving some complaints about it. And right away, I called her up right on the 4th of July, and I said, I know we're getting some of these calls. I know this is going on. We talked about it. Probably now in hindsight, maybe something we shouldn't have done. But what I learned from that is she was willing to work with us. We owned it as staff. The director and the operations director and I owned it as staff. And we learned from that. We got better communication out, and we certainly didn't do that again on the middle of the week on a holiday. But we had done that in past practice. So again, it's being innovative, and sometimes you learn your best things from the way something didn't turn out the way you thought it did. And that's again where I go back to pause and perspective and look at different perspectives. But I also believe in supporting staff and trying new ideas. Top 3 things I've seen work well with large teams that I think might work here. One is to focus on the retention of staff. Many municipalities and even private industry are all struggling with how do we retain staff? How do we recruit the staff we need? I firmly believe in investing in the folks that we already have, and cross-training for like work tasks, utilization of equipment, and growing the team from within, sharing experiences of knowledge. We're going to have to bring in new staff. How do we grow and cultivate that? I've known through my career, people don't think of public service. They don't think about going into their career. It's oftentimes a thankless position. People just don't understand it. And so I feel it's critical that we all become ambassadors for our communities in encouraging young people to come into the career, but even people that might be transitioning from one career to the next. I find it to be extremely fulfilling. It isn't sometimes that we don't have our challenges, or we're starting to feel, wow, you know, the public's not happy with something. But overall, that's what makes me want to come to work every day, is to be able to do problem solving for the public and to make the community better than what we find it, and to teach what we've learned along the way. Communication. I know it's easy to say communication, but it's critical. And I've held bi-monthly meetings with my supervisors, and quarterly I would hold all department meetings with everybody. I think it's critical to disseminate the information, hopefully get some information back. I also believe it's a chance where you can celebrate things with the team, the whole entire department, things that have gone right, and maybe some things we've learned from, and to share some of that too. I think it's an opportunity for sharing. I also believe that I would be having meetings with the division heads on a weekly basis, bi-weekly, depending on what might be going on, to keep everybody informed of what's going on in the department. It's a very vast department. We're spread all over the place. You got to keep communication going. And I was talking with Matthew. I thought I saw him come in, Matthew. And we were talking about some things there that I think I'd like to see happen as well, Matthew was talking about. So I think communication is paramount. And then keeping the team focused on results. I think it empowers our team to be innovative and to try other things. I think you have to try results and focus on the results and work with the division heads to focus on the results that are in their strategic plan. You got to stay focused on what that is, and that will be our guiding post to make sure that we're delivering the services that our counselors and the mayor, Ryan, et cetera, are expecting us to do. What could I bring to some of your challenges and your opportunities? And that's why I put the compass up there. I tend to be a little bit visual because it helps to keep me focused on where I'm trying to go as well. And I believe in it. Instead of being the only person with the map, I believe in leadership roles. It's to guide the team to where we are going. All of you have been in your positions. You've been brought to the city for a reason to do your jobs. It's not for me to second guess what you're doing. It's for me to help assist all of you on what you're trying to accomplish. So that's why I go back to be a compass. Instill department values, and I talk about this a lot, but it's pause. Pause before you start making decisions. If you're not sure, let's pause a minute. Perspective, it's bringing in other ideas. Maybe the way I'm looking at it or the other person's looking at it, have we really explored other perspectives? And then kindness and respect. Treat each other with respect and be kind. We make mistakes, myself included, and instead of doing the I got you kind of thing, be kind. Show grace. Those are instilling those department values. And then I would come in and I would look and say, do we keep what we're doing? Do we need to chuck it? It's just not working and we need to not do this anymore? Or is it something we're doing that there's ways to improve? So it's not to say every time you come in that something all needs to be changed. There may be things that you guys are saying works well. Let's keep that. But you all may have other ideas of, geez, if only someone had said, why are we doing this? Why should we continue to keep doing this? That's when we maybe might want to pause, have a different perspective, and then decide, do we keep it or chuck it? Or is there a different way to do it? And then I've worked very hard in communicating with the mayor and senior leadership to manage expectations due to staff shortages. That's not new. A lot of communities are facing that. And it's what services, for whom, at what cost? What are we able to afford, or where do we want to set our priorities? Who are we trying to serve? And what services? What are the priorities? Because we only have so many staff, so much budget. I was asked a question earlier, how are we going to cut them? If we have to cut $1 million, how are we going to do that? These are some of the questions I would be asking. And how does all of that translate back to the strategic plan for the city? Vacancy challenges. Single point of failure, that was something I adopted. And it was really looking at cross-utilization of staff. And I know you're already doing some of that, I believe, right now. But it's really sharing experiences. Now I see some people nodding. Sharing the experiences, sharing the knowledge amongst staff. I hail from the north, so we would get involved. I'm going to talk about my snow analogy because I have great experience with snow analogies. We would have to bring every staff we could find to help us with snow removal, whether it was shoveling the sidewalks in front of municipal buildings, providing for snow plowing, or even helping out the fleet. And I know I was talking with our fleet person earlier today, the fleet in needing to make sure the equipment kept running. And there was a time I had 4 people in my fleet department, floor mechanics. I was down to 1. We were in a major snowstorm and we needed to get a belt. I told mechanic, please, I need you to keep working on the equipment. We got to get it out on the road and get the operator working that. I'll go and get the belt. It was an hour round trip to get the belt with the snow. But that's where we all have to roll up our sleeves and be that single point of failure. How can we help each other out in those situations? And I know I'm talking about an emergency situation, but that boils down to even daily operations. There were times, and I was involved with our Parks and Recreation and doing park maintenance. We don't know if people going in to pick up all the trash in the parks. So we had to be innovative on how are we going to handle that? How are we going to prioritize what are the immediate needs? And that really translated in COVID, especially during COVID time. So we had to prioritize what were we going to deliver as services, what are some of the things we couldn't do. But it was also important that those decisions were in lockstep with, this case, Ryan, and with the mayor, so that we can manage that information back out to the public, and working with Matthew to get that word out. Employee engagement. I think, again, that's where quarterly department meetings are important. Also, the weekly meetings, I talked about that already. The supervisor meetings, and those meetings would be meetings by the supervisors. They would put the agenda together, they would bring up topics, and we would also share information. What was working right? What can you share back that you did in your respective area that maybe other areas could learn from? But also, in the same token, what did you try and you realized didn't work right? Or we'd been doing and you decided that's just not something we want to keep doing. That information would be shared there. I also talk about going to the Gemba. And what that means to me, going to the Gemba, means going to the source where the work is occurring and seeing what information can be shared there. Rather than someone that's maybe sitting at a desk who doesn't understand the operation, how does it work? You need to go right to where it's occurring and ask, what can you share back on what's working or what's not working? And I also believe it's important to celebrate successes, even the little ones. I think it's important because we can learn from those. And I also know that we all do and spend a lot of time in our jobs. And I think it's important to celebrate those successes. And that could be in a variety of different ways. It's not always just about recognizing someone with a certificate, not to take that away. That's important. But oftentimes it might just be a pat on the back, depending on the person, or it could be writing a short note to somebody to say, hey, thanks. I recognize you did this. That was really great. Thank you for that. Facility assessment and planning, and that's developing. We talked a little bit about this earlier this morning, but developing a plan or modifying the plan according to city goals, identify priority projects, utilize capital asset management program. I don't believe you have one of those right now, and maybe looking at that or maybe needing to add to it, maybe make it a little bit more robust. I find those to be useful tools to help identify where are we going to prioritize resources, because I think I was told 80 facilities. That's a lot of facilities to manage. We even talked about, are there some that are surplus that perhaps we no longer need to keep in our asset management portfolio? Those are some of the questions. Pedestrian safety. I've been reading about the grant that you've received for the Smart City Intersection Program. That's going to be a wealth of information for us for all kinds of planning, and to explore installing asphalt murals. I know that I've seen, as I've been driving around the community yesterday and a little bit this morning, the culture, the murals, the art. I happen to love art myself personally. So are there ways that we can do that with volunteer programs that I've seen utilized in other communities where pedestrian murals have helped with traffic calming? Running hot. I used to use that term very much. I had staff that were very, very dedicated to their work, and they would run hot because they wanted to get into areas. They wanted to, in this case, it was snow removal that tended to be a problem. Also with some of the solid waste folks that we had, they'd run hot. And so what we started to do is we had peer reviews. And what we had was an accident review committee. So if somebody did have an accident, we had staff people reviewing what occurred with that accident. Was it something preventable, or was it something that there was something blatantly going on there? And from there, we learned, what did we need to do for additional training for some of the staff, which was also what we learned. Did someone need something more with defensive driving? Did someone need additional training on the equipment? Or in one instance, we found out that we had a problem with a railroad crossing and it caught the blade of a snowplow truck. Well, you can imagine what that would have done. and we needed to work with the railroad company to get that fixed. So again, it was more as a peer review to use the information on how can we learn from it. I also started looking at a safety committee. We wanted to improve upon safety for the staff. And so we started to develop a safety plan within the organization on how might we improve upon safety. Infrastructure projects, I was asked about how do we do that when we have all these projects going on and all these competing needs. And I talked about it earlier, but conducting what I call a dump meeting, where you identify early on in the project what's required for the review of the project, what might be lacking in the plans, what might we need more information about. We even talked about, are there some code requirements that may need to be relooked at? Somebody just gave me a high five back there. And then streamlining the permitting. That again is another way to look at how do we streamline the permitting. We have to look at both ends. What are we receiving and what are we requiring? And then also going back to the GIMBA, for those of you that are involved in the permitting process and the reviewing process, are there better ways to do what we're doing? Or are there different levels of review? And in one organization I worked in, if you wanted an accelerated review, you had to pay more fee for it. Wasn't popular, but it helped to manage expectations. And then staff resources. Again, it's managing expectations with what we've got. If everything's a priority, and I know it's cliche, nothing's a priority. And it also sets us up for failure. And so it's identifying priorities to match the resources. Also understanding at times, if we need to be looking outside of the city to outsource a few things because of maybe a major blip we have because we have a bunch of development coming in at one time, or we had a major storm occur, or I had an embankment along the river all caving in, and I needed to put sheetrock up right away, and our local excavator did not have the resources available. I had to bring in another contractor. At the time it wasn't popular, but it stopped the embankment from falling into the river. I almost lost houses, natural gas, and a telephone pole. So you have to be quick. And during that whole time, I was actually directing traffic. So you got to do what you got to do in emergency situations. And I think that's it. I was trying to talk fast because I know I could see Ryan was looking at his clock. So I was trying to be quick.
All right, let's give Laura a quick hand. All right. So thank you very much, Laura. You can, get a drink of water.
I got to drink water. I was talking fast, sorry. Plus, I'm known to talk fast anyways.
Oh, that's great. So I'll try to recall a few questions from the last couple of days for consistency purposes while other people start thinking of their questions. And I'll take a look at any text questions that come. Thanks, Ronald. That might pop in here as well. But one of the questions that has come up the last couple of days is about work from home. So what are your thoughts on a work from home policy? You have to speak into the microphone.
Yep. No, and that's a fair question because that's occurring across the country. I'm not opposed to work from home. I'm doing some of it myself right now in the current position I'm in. But I do find that it's going to have to be a blending. I'm going to have to see what the administration's feelings are about that. But I think it's something we have to wrestle with. It's a reality. And if we're going to continue to either maintain or recruit staff, it's a reality we have to look at. I think it's communicating, again, expectations of what's the productivity. And that's not to say that it isn't productive. I've had some people say it's really been more productive for me. And I've had others say, nope, not so much. It doesn't work. So I do think it's important to have engagement. I think it really boils down to how are we going to stay engaged? I do believe at times it's important that we physically can see each other because that helps to build a team. But that isn't to say you can't do it remotely either. So I think it's going to have to be an ebb and flow. I think we're going to have conversation about that with the division heads and how are we going to be able to bring back results and know what's going on with people. But then there has to be a trust level too. I find myself when I'm working at home, I actually work more at times, longer. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. But then even when I'm in the office, I work a lot at the office too. So I think it's a blending. I'm not adverse to that. as provided the administration overall wants to do that too. But no, I've worked through that before.
Okay. Second question. How would you include diversity, equity, inclusion into your decision making, whether that be around personnel, whether that be around policy decisions, things of that nature? How would you go about thinking about that?
I somewhat said a little bit about that when I started talking about pause and perspective, but that's been a cornerstone for me. And I think that's where you have to be able to have people come in and say, and have the trust built that, hey, Laura, did you think about this? Or have we missed this? And I will tell you, there are times I've had staff come and say to me that, Laura, we need to be thinking about it this way. Or geez, even Matthew and I were talking about just even how certain things are even discussed today versus how they may have been a year ago or 2 years ago. And we talked about media training. I believe in having other people come and say, wow, we need to talk about this, or we need to think about this, or have we included everybody that needs to be included? So yeah, that's a cornerstone for me.
Okay. Third question I'll ask, and then we'll open it up to the group. And I think this has been an interesting question from the group was how would you verbalize this role? How would you verbalize what this job is?
We've talked a little bit about this too, and I was talking a little bit about that with Matthew. What I have found in my career is most people do not know what public works is. There are probably people within the department who don't even know what everybody else does. We're probably one of the most diverse organizations within a city that you're going to find. And I don't mean to take away from anybody else, but we really get involved with a little bit of everything. So I describe public works to folks when I'm talking to them about it is you'll be able to flush your toilet, you can turn on your faucet, you can get your trash put out at the curb. We make sure that when people go through intersections, hopefully they're stopping at the stoplights and stopping at the stop signs. We help to direct the traffic, and we basically do everything in between. And I was involved with Parks and Recreation, which happened to be under my role in Public Works too, and we provide the fun. And so it's really diverse, and that's one of the reasons why I love Public Works, because it is so diverse. But when you start to talk about flushing toilets and turning on the water faucet, making sure the tree canopy is preserved, making sure our roads have no potholes, that's Public Works. It's really down into basic needs. We provide for basic needs. And I even used to kid with my police chief and my fire chief. Again, going back to snow, because that's where I hail from. I used to say to them, I can appreciate what fire and police do. Everybody knows what they do, but I always reminded them, if the roads aren't plowed, you're not getting there. And they're like, oh yeah, Laura, okay. And we used to kid about it, but that there's a lot of truth in that statement. And those were the other things that I would explain about Public Works. We're also first responders, and that's really the nature of what I'm saying. And you all, in all truthfulness, all do great work. And you are what taps into our community. And that's one of the reasons why I like local government work. I'm kind of answering a little bit more, but that's why I love local government work, because we are where we get to tap into our residents and make their lives better.
Cool. Awesome. All right, let's open it up to the group. Jeremy.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mhm.
So a lot of the things on your list are on mine as well. So that's why I was very happy to see that. We've experienced a big growth spurt here. So you've got a lot of experience with these types of issues. How do you feel about sustainability as we grow?
Can you tell me in what context? I'm not sure if I
Sure.
understand
So
what you're asking.
yeah. So as it's related to development occurring within the city and trying to balance that with environmental protection and sustainable growth, not just unchecked growth.
Well, I was heavily involved with sustainability, and sustainability can mean a lot of different things. So it's working with the administration on how are they viewing sustainability. I mean, Public Works is involved with it to a limited extent. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but with development, it's working through. I'm hearing from Matthew that we just now started with native grass plantings and doing that for stormwater management. Yes, I mean, I had a water treatment, water pollution control facility that I was helping to oversee. We were doing improvements to that plant to get it poised for being more sustainable in the future. As a part of that, maybe to answer your question, we also were working with our local agricultural community because we had a lot of farmland around us. And we were looking at innovative ways to work through with them, putting in agricultural buffers, et cetera. So not sure if I fully understand what you're asking me.
No, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. The passing of the mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I can.
Okay, I think Blake brings up a really good question about sustainability and working with our natural systems as opposed to, mentioning a spurt of growth and I guess how we develop in a way where we can manage the influx of population or tourists that are coming in to this town and being able to develop with our natural systems versus, in an urban sprawl type of fashion. And I think if that is kind of going along with, and then what are your thoughts or, along those lines?
Well, I think there are things that we can do with site design and implementing that, but then making sure our code requirements are paired with that. And then we would have to work with community development planning. I'm not sure of all the structures here yet because I'm still learning that. But working with our planning folks to look at how do we implement that, and then working with the administration in looking at what is going to be our sustainability plan. I've had experience working on that. I was the spokesperson for the community I was with previously and helping with our sustainability. And sustainability comes in a whole lot of ways. I mean, even with neighborhood gardens, et cetera. So yes, I believe in looking at sustainability and how are we proactive about that. But that goes back to what the administration is also doing.
All right. Other questions? I got one chat that came in here. You mentioned showing kindness and respect by giving grace. How does that balance with accountability?
It doesn't take away from accountability at all. It's just how you go about being accountable. So instead of, unfortunately, I had some staff that like to just do an I gotcha and point fingers at people. Well, that's not accountable. That's just being a bully, in my opinion. I think it's where you come up and you say, I'm asking for grace because I know maybe I made a mistake or I don't understand something. So please give me grace as we're working through it. And being kind and respectful, just being respectful to people. I've had people in other parts of my career that I've had staff people yelling at each other. Well, that doesn't accomplish anything. That's what I'm talking about, kindness and respect. That doesn't take away from accountability. We're still all accountable. It's how you go about holding someone accountable. That's where kindness and respect comes in. If somebody's done something wrong, you don't start to talk through that in front of their peers. You bring somebody into a room and say, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware this is blah, 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 what happened? And then you talk through it. But I've been in situations where people have not been kind and have not been respectful. And that doesn't help make people accountable at all. In fact, it causes people just the adverse. They will actually start to hide things and not bring to the forefront things that are going on.
Good.
The cities that you had managed previously, can you talk a little bit about the population? Was it a rural area? I know that you have worked in public works before, but I'm curious to know about the area in which you've worked.
City of Rockford, I was in the Public Works Department, not as a director role, but I worked in that department earlier in my career. It's a little bit smaller than than Chattanooga, but I came here as a benchmarking group years ago because there are some similarities, a lot of similarities actually, but just in a little bit bigger scale. I would say the same thing about Beloit, your Parks and Recreation, very similar to where you're looking at bringing in Parks and Recreation and services here. So there are a lot of analogies here. And also, when I worked in the private sector, I've been involved heavily with development, both on both sides. So I fully understand the need for streamlining permit processes and working through those pretty quickly.
Other questions? There's another one here about environmental stewardship, but I feel like we've hit that, folks. Yeah? Okay. Great. All right. Any other questions? Going once.
Can you describe your leadership style?
A little bit more about the leadership
Sure,
style.
absolutely. Leadership style, asked what my leadership style is, and it's pretty open. Hopefully you can tell I'm pretty approachable. I like having on my door open. I think it's important. And if something's going on and I can't quite get to you at that point in time, I'll say to you, hey, tied up with something, can I get back with you? But I think it's important to be available to the staff and to help look at what are the challenges you're facing and how can I be a resource to help you be successful. And I know that sounds easy to be done, but it's really being in communication with also Ryan, with the mayor, other department heads, because we really all work together. I mean, Public Works provides a lot of support to a lot of departments. So I think it's important to communicate that, but also to just be accessible. And there are going to be times where there's going to be a lot of competing needs going on. And that's maybe when you just openly say, hey, I know you got this issue. Can you come back at this point in time? I've been accustomed to having, 2 phones going and 3 people knee deep in my door. But I will get to people when I can. But I do think it's important to be accessible. And back to leadership too. I talked a little bit about all my meetings, but it's not because I want to meet that isn't productive either. But I do think it's important, whether it's through Zoom or through some type of meeting that way on the computer and or physically being in a room. I think it's communicating and making sure that the right team members are in the room all as a part of the decision making. And that's where you get that different perspectives. And I think it is critical because I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know everything about everything. I don't want to know that. That's why we all have all of you and others in the department. And so how do we tap into those resources?
Okay, Ronald, yes.
Why does Chattanooga interest you in the next place for your career?
Why does Chattanooga interest you for the next place for
Yeah,
your career?
I've been asked that a lot. This reminds me, it's just a little bit bigger than the communities I've been in, but it reminds me a lot of communities I've worked in and lived in, actually. And there's a lot in Chattanooga that with my hobbies that I like to do. I really like being outdoors. I like physical fitness. I like all the different opportunities and diversity that's here with art, culture. I love all of that. And got a plethora of restaurants too, which are great. I've been trying to get to a lot of them. And I actually went up to Lookout Mountain yesterday. So yeah, I've been trying to see a lot of the city while I'm here.
Cool. All right. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Okay, so you say that you have an open door policy, but not everybody works in this building or even in an office building.
True.
So what would be your strategy to kind of meet people where they're at so they feel like they have a seat at the table too?
That's a great question. And in fact, I talked about that. I was asked, what would my first 6 months look like? My first 6 months would look like trying to get out to all of the different facilities. I don't know if I'll be able to tap all the staff in the department, but I'm sure going to attempt to do that. And some of it might have to be at meetings and I don't even know the facilities yet. I'm still learning that, but to get to some of the different facilities and just have, I don't want to call them coffee chats because not everybody likes coffee, but to at least have just to sit down, hey, let's just chat. What's going on? Help me understand, kind of a thing. And then I'm going to have to rely a lot on the division heads and supervisors. I think supervisors are just as important, and to meet with the supervisors to make sure that there's information flowing back and forth.
There's a question that kind of ties into that, talking about in the past, large decisions might have been made solely based on discussions with management. Would you include frontline individuals in decision making?
Yes, that's where I talked about going back to the GIMBA. Excuse me. And that's where in some other organizations, I was looking at what was going on in our fleet department, and we had to streamline that because we could not get mechanics hired. And we had a very aging fleet. I had to go back in with the fleet manager and the mechanics to say, what do we need to be doing? Where are ways we can streamline this? Because I certainly did not want to burn out the few mechanics I had at that point in time. They were very valued into the whole system because if the equipment's not working, nobody's going to be able to do any work. So then we had to be innovative on what were we going to look in our fleet. So we decided to do a hook lift system. But that took about 6 months to work through because I actually brought in demos of other hook lift systems to actually have the people that were going to be working in them touching, feeling, using the equipment to be a part of the decision making when we were ordering a piece of equipment. So I use that as an example, but you need to go back to the folks that are going to be working in that and ask them, not always, but you try to get input from that. And sometimes decisions will be made that may not fall with what the staff is saying, but then that's where you need to communicate why. Even though you may not agree, sometimes that healthy disagreement and explaining why.
All right. Questions out there? One more came in. We do have some pockets with paid disparities within public works. How would you go about trying to address pay disparities?
Those are compression issues. I'm very familiar. We have compression issues, I think, in almost every municipality I've been involved with, either myself personally or my colleagues that I talk to with this issue. And that would be working very closely with Ryan, our HR department. In doing that, I understand that there was a recent tax increase that helped to pay and support some of the salaries. I'm not sure if it was a tax increase. I thought it was to help with some of the salaries. I'm sure it didn't fill all the needs, but it's an attempt. I will tell you, I lauded that because there are a lot of organizations I know that are still dealing with mass compression issues. That's a critical issue, and you have to balance it. It's not a one size is going to fit all, but working very closely with Ryan and with the mayor and others to see how we might bridge that, because that's the only way we're going to be able to retain the staff we have.
Okay. Other questions? All right. Let's see. I think we're about at it. I'll just say thank you to you all and the folks who have been participating in the stream. This has been a fun experiment for 3 days. Y'all have been very welcoming to our candidates. So I just would say thank you. If you all would thank Laura for her time. And she'll be here sticking around to visit with folks for, I think, until at least 1 o'clock. Well, that's 10 minutes, but at least 1:15. At least 1:15. So hang out if you want to. Thanks, everybody.
I already turned.